All right, welcome back, guys. We had to redo the entire video, which is why it wasn't posted yesterday, because the entire first video just wasn't what we wanted. So I'm redoing it today, right now, and it will be posted before the day's over, hopefully. One thing I wanted to go over was we are going to the Edinburgh Manor. It's either Edinburgh or Edinburgh. We've been saying it wrong some way, somehow. So we'll find out on Monday, I guess. We are going to the Edinburgh Manor March 6th at 8 p.m. And we will be going live once we get there. So you guys will be able to see the uncut, unedited version in real time, which is pretty cool. You guys will get the full video March 13th. We plan on posting it around noon, but we'll see with how everything's going right now. Maybe March 14th. I just don't want to make promises I can't keep at this point because this is supposed to be the first video and it backfired. So we'll see. Today we're going over the Sallie House. It is located in one of the most haunted cities in the country, Atchison, Kansas. And I can't say if I'm saying that right or not, so correct me if I'm wrong. Basically, the house was built in 1871 by Michael Finney. And later he moved him and his family into the house. And Michael Finney later died in the house in 1872. So he lived there for a year and then died at 10 p.m. So if something crazy happens at 10 p.m., that's why. The front of the house was the office space, and the upstairs is the living quarters for the Finney family. Now, the Finney family later moved out in 1993 due to the lack of space that the house held for them, and the house was then rented out to a young couple, Tony and Deborah Pickman, and this is where the house starts to get like its crazy name. The first encounter. So Tony and Deborah Pickman just had their son Taylor, and this is where the things started to get kind of crazy. So Deborah's sister was over, and Tony ran upstairs to grab something, and he peeked into the nursery and saw all of like the teddy bears had been moved off the shelf and organized into a circle on the ground. Now they put them back because they thought, okay, whatever, it must be Greg, Tony's brother, messing with them or something. Well, halfway down the stairs, Tony realized he never grabbed what he went upstairs to grab, so he turned around, went back up there, peeked in the nursery, and the teddy bears were in the circle again. So then he thought, it's definitely Greg messing with us. So then the day after, he confronted Greg, and Greg said, hey, that's a brilliant thing, but it wasn't me. I wouldn't break into your house just to do a prank like that. And basically, Greg like challenged the spirit. So like he got his camera out. It was like a still photo. And he was like, oh, there's something here. Make the teddy bears move. Well, they did. The teddy bears flew off the chair, and Tony reacted. You know, he grabbed Taylor, told his brother to get the hell out of the house, grabbed his wife, told her to get the hell out of the house. And in the car, while it's taking time to buckle Taylor in because of the car seat, Deborah got the car running. Greg's like shocked, and Tony feels a pain on his back. So, just the start of many scratches, he was scratched. They didn't see it until they got to their mother's house or their parents' house, but he was scratched on the back. Now, the Pickmans started to experience a whole variety of stuff. To start, their dog would growl at the nursery upstairs, and to this day, like service animals refuse to go inside the nursery. Fires start randomly throughout the house, like a bib, and like apparently some people feel like a burning sensation on them. And with that, Tony started to get attacked with scratches, bruises, the burning sensation I just talked about, and in some cases he would be pinned down, held down after he was knocked down by something they couldn't see. And the scratches and bruises never carried over to Deborah or Taylor. It was just Tony. Now, on one occasion, Sallie had bit Tony on the back of the thigh, and like, I don't know about you, but like, if I was a 7-year-old little girl, the last thing I would want to do is go to a man's thigh, especially the back of it. Like, maybe like an arm, yeah, but not the back of a thigh. Like, to me, that's just weird. Like, if you're, like, having little girl thoughts, you wouldn't jump to the back of a man's thigh. At least in my opinion. They have cold areas throughout the entire house.
Recorded strange sensations of cold.
I actually feel like a small circumference about 4 inches in diameter coming straight down.
That's what she said?
My thing with this, the house was built in 1871. Okay? The insulation is not as good as it is now. So I feel like that in some cases with older houses, the reason they feel so many cold areas is because the house is just old. That would be too logical, though. No, it can't be. Another thing they would experience is objects would move on their own when Tony would approach them. I don't think that's true. And the fact it's all singling out to Tony, like, I know, we'll go a little bit more into it, but, like, I know Sallie doesn't like men, but, like, I don't like men, and I wouldn't single out one dude that doesn't believe in me. Like, I would terrorize the people that do. And, like, I feel Tony had, like, buyer's remorse. Or, like, he was just, like, losing his mind because they just had a kid. And he's like, oh, man, this sucks. Like, why would I ever have a kid again? Ugh, gross. Oh, I know what I can do. I can fuck with them. Yep, that's my theory. They also heard disembodied voices, animal noises, thuds, thumps, and scratching throughout the entire house. Pretty much anything paranormal that you can think of, they heard. On one occasion, Tony went into the kitchen for a glass of milk. Sorry. Tony went to the kitchen for a glass of milk and saw Sallie for the first time. She was a little girl, white, in a white dress from the 1800s, and he dropped his glass of milk because he was so scared. And the reason I giggle is because I don't know why, but I just, like, picture him, like, throwing the milk on her face, which is what I would do. But yeah. On many occasions, they ended up staying at relatives' houses because they couldn't bring themselves to stay the night in their own home, which I think is, like, kind of crazy. In 1993, Tony invited his sister over, Barbara Connor. She was known to have psychic abilities. She lived in California, and they specifically invited her so they wouldn't become, like, the talk of the town because it was small town Kansas. I think they invited her specifically because who better to lie for you than your sister? But we're not ready to have that conversation. She stated that the little girl named Sallie was 7 years old and complained about a sore hand, abdominal pain, and a sore tooth. She also stated that Sallie thought Deborah had too many rules and was too bossy. I just think she maybe didn't like her sister-in-law, but we'll see. She advised that the Pickmans be careful with their son Taylor. As any kid might, Sallie might unintentionally hurt Taylor. Post-traumatic stress disorder. No. Postpartum depression is what I meant to say. It's a real thing, okay? I don't ever plan to have it because I don't ever want kids, but it's a real thing. My question about this whole Barbara Connor thing is how much of the story did she know before she went into the house? And, like, another thing. So, allegedly, the story of Sallie, okay? A mother came in with a little girl named Sallie who was complaining of abdominal pains. Charles Finney, which was Michael Finney's son, the guy who built the house, his son, was the doctor that diagnosed Sallie with appendicitis and rushed her into emergency surgery. He did not use anesthesia, and if he did, there wasn't enough time for it to kick in because Sallie was awake and aware when he cut into her abdomen. And she ended up dying on the operating table because of it around 1906. Her last memory, by the way, is of a man torturing her. There is no history of a 7-year-old girl named Sallie in that time frame. Now, some believe that Sallie is a disguise for a negative entity that's much more darker and just trying to get accepted by the family. My thing is, okay, How much did she look up before she went into the house? Because Charles Finney was a very well-known man. He was a mayor at one point, and especially his father, who was the one who built the house. Fun fact, actually. He was also a brilliant figure skater. She was known as Miss Colby of Baltimore. And no, I did not say that wrong. He identified as a female when he was skating, which is fucking awesome. Mayor, doctor, and a female figure skater. But yeah, so he, like, you can still look stuff up about him to this day. So like, there's like articles and articles and articles on this guy. So how much did she look up? Because I just don't believe her. I don't believe in psychics. I believe in empaths and being able to feel, sure, but not psychics. The different perspectives for Deborah and Tony. Deborah did try to calm Sally's spirit by buying her toys and kind of just letting her know that she's like accepted into the family. But it didn't seem to help. And Deborah did accept Sallie as a little girl, but Tony did not. So Tony has a backstory of being really Catholic, I guess. So he refused to accept any spirit that Sallie tried to perceive as. And almost like a mimic. I don't know if you know what a mimic is. I'll pop it up here. But a mimic is like a shape-shifting kind of demon. And they can literally shapeshift into anything they want. Whether it's you, someone else, your spouse, your partner, whatever it might be. And Sallie showed herself as a little girl, his wife, Deborah, and an older lady. And I'll go into her a little bit more in a second. When he still refused to accept the spirit, his thoughts, dreams, attitude, and mentality would become completely different. So they started affecting his mentality and like the way everything was in his head, which I think it was just postpartum. A little story about another owner of the house. So they had a daughter named Heather, and Heather was known to have a imaginary friend that she called Sallie, and later she was able to identify Sallie from a drawing that Tony had drawn from a vivid dream. And my thing is, kids have a very drastic imagination, and the picture of Sallie looks a lot like every other girl on the street. And especially coming from a little girl. I mean, like, if she was like, oh, that's my friend Sallie, you know, like, what if she just wanted to put a face to the name because you didn't believe her as parents? So, I don't know. We'll see. The spirits known to haunt the Sallie House and how they are connected. This was really eye-opening yesterday, and we kind of like lost our minds for a minute because when we first started researching this, we didn't know all of the entities and how they were connected to the Sallie House until we did. So Sallie, though there is no proof of a 7-year-old named Sallie ever existing during this time frame, some say that she is a darker entity disguised as Sallie. Now, the Pickmans did have the show Sightings come in, and their psychic found a grave belonging to a Sallie Isabel Hall.
Peter James described a small voice calling him toward one particular grave. Here, he said, lay Sallie. But the marker was so old and weather-worn, the lettering had disappeared. But when Sightings checked the cemetery's records, we discovered that Plot 1, 4th row west, was the final resting place of Sallie Isabel Hall.
Now, Sallie Isabel Hall, at least on the show, was perceived completely different. So they made it seem like he found the grave and physical body of Sallie, when the fact is, Sallie is a 7-year-old and white and a little girl with a bow in her hair. Okay? What they didn't mention was Sallie Hall was born in 1871. Okay, the same year the house was built, which I think is kind of cool. And she died in 1905, which makes her 34 years old. She is literally as old as the house was when the alleged Sallie died in 1906, by 1 year off. Okay, that's crazy. That coincidence is nuts to me. 1871 is when the house was built. That's when Sallie was born. 1905 is when she died. 1906 is when Sallie died. Okay. Other things they forgot to mention. Sallie Hall is a colored woman, 34 years old, and a mother of 14 kids who is married to a Will Hall. Debunked. Not the same Sallie. Charles Finney, he's the doctor that allegedly killed Sallie in 1906. Joanna Barnes, which her story is kind of crazy. Not even hers, it's her son. So Joanna Barnes was recently divorced from her ex-husband Frank, mother of 3 with 1 on the way. She was institutionalized in a state hospital for mental instability. Same. And she was released into Charles Finley's care. Now, the deed of the house that Charles' brother built was the neighboring house, which was 508 and 504, I believe. She owned that house. The deed was in her name. Now, when she was under Charles Finley's care, or Finney's care, she tried to commit suicide in the house. So she had her 6-year-old son, Frank Jr., and she went and laid on the cot after turning on the gas, and the fumes overpowered both of them, but she survived and her son didn't. Her son, Frank Jr., is also known to haunt the house. Which, how? How do you botch a suicide attempt? Why would you bring your child into it? I don't even like children, but I sure as hell wouldn't do that. Just blows my mind. And this happened a year after the alleged death of Sallie happened in the house. Charles, what the fuck are you doing? Agnes Finney. This is Charles' sister. Joanna deeded the house to Agnes, where she lived out the rest of her life and died in the house November 28th of 1939 at midnight. So that's 3 documented deaths in the house. Michael Finney, Agnes Finney, and Frank Jr. Okay, Edith. Now this is the old woman I was talking about earlier. She's known to be a senile old woman who everyone seems to love except for Tony, because Tony believes that it's the entity disguising itself into something more accepting for Tony to accept the spirit and become like a full circle, basically. Now, there are a couple of spirits that we cannot connect to the house. The first one is Brandon, which I just think is a really weird name. I'm sorry, I don't know why. Nothing against anyone with the name Brandon. I just feel like there's Agnes and Charles and, Joanna, and then there's Brandon. I'm sorry. Basically, he's an easily irritated dominant adult male with a good sense of humor who pranks adults in order to make children laugh. But I don't know how he's connected to the house. It was the most random thing ever. Wait for this one, though. Paul. Paul is a young slave boy who was lynched, which means killed outside of a judicial system. And it's unclear to what his relation is to the house because slavery was over long before the house was ever built. Though we know that's not true. I mean, racism is still present to this day, so it wouldn't surprise me if back in the 1800s, 1900s, someone lynched a young slave boy. Ryan, a relative of Sallie's who speaks with a slight accent. I personally don't believe Sallie ever existed, so I don't know who the fuck this Ryan guy is. And Tom Byrons, a former Civil War soldier who sometimes appears in the house dressed in his military uniform. Okay. The part we've all been waiting for is the basement or the cellar of the Sallie house. Now, it is known to have had satanic rituals done in the basement. There was a pentagram on the floor, but it has since been burned over or painted over. I think it was both at some point in time. But basically, they've kicked out the tenants, and what would you do if, you were renting your house out to somebody and you came in to do, a monthly, walkthrough and you just saw a giant fucking pentagram on the floor? Would you kick them out? Because technically, Satanism is an actual religion. Like, people believe in that stuff, and that's fine. I don't personally, but, and I'm not dissing anyone who does, because some people do it with like a boundary of, I'm not going to go actually kill anything. But like, to the people that like take it out of hand and like sacrifice stuff, wouldn't that technically be like discrimination based off religion? Like, couldn't you get in trouble for kicking a tenant out? Well, I guess it was like damaging property, but that's what the deposit's for, right? Like, I don't know. But basically, there was a pentagram on the basement floor that was painted / burnt over. So you can no longer see, you can see the stain of where it was, but you can't see the pentagram itself. There's a hole in the brick wall in the basement where some say that the negative entity resides. Now, some also say that the land connected to the house in that hole is what's haunted. It's because there was satanic rituals that had taken place down in the basement. So basically, it like created a portal at some point in time. I don't know if it's still open or if it's closed or not, but I don't know. We'll see. I don't know what I would do. But yeah, so that's the Sallie House. If there's any advice you guys have on the video process or just our channel in general, I would love to hear it. I don't care if it's good or bad criticism. Like I said, this is a learning process, and I want to be able to hear what you guys have to say or what we can improve on. If you guys have any places in the Midwest that you guys would like us to go, we would love to go check it out. We are going to the Stanley on early July, I think, with 2 other people, so it's not a group of 8 this time. It's only 2 people. And we are just so excited to get this started. I've been wanting to do this forever, so has Lydia, and we just can't wait to see where this goes. So far for the Edinburgh Manor, the votes are leading to hide and seek. Lydia wants to do 1 floor. I want to do the entire building, but it might make sense to do 1 floor because we have 8 people, so it's going to take a long time. So if you want the first floor, comment A. If you want the basement, comment B. So yeah, comment down below if you guys have any recommendations, any criticism, any advice, any corrections, anything like that. I appreciate all the good and the bad. Other than that, we will see you guys on Monday when we go live at 8 p.m. at the Edinburgh. I don't know. Peace.
Did I say it right the first time then? No. So Charles Finley. It was Dr. Charles Finley.
Basically, the Finley family. Finny. I did it. You
The front served as a post office, and then the upstairs was where the family lived. What?
Office space, not post office. He was a doctor, so he used it as a surgical area. Okay. And retraction.
All right, so the Finley he diagnosed Sallie. I almost said Charlie.
Charlie.
I don't know who Charlie is, but
My sister.
oh, Charlie was having appendicitis.
No, she had tonsillitis.
Once Joanna moved in to the next door neighbor.
Moved into the next door neighbor?